All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. It is just about 6 o'clock. I will start with just a few housekeeping notes for folks that are attending and joining us tonight. Thank you so much for spending about the next hour with us. We will be very respectful of time. We will end promptly at 7 o'clock, if not before. My name is Jamie Kaintz. I'm the Director of Student Services. And I just want to let everybody know that we will be stopping about every 15 minutes or so to answer any questions. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, please use the question and answer feature that's available at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, move your mouse over our pictures and a menu bar will come up at the bottom and you'll see a little Q&A. It looks like folders. So just click on that and type your question in there. We may not get to all of your questions. If we don't get to your specific question, we will be taking note of all of the questions that are asked, and I'll be responding over the next couple of days to you personally. So please, we're going to try to get to all the questions, but if we don't, I'll definitely be getting back in touch with you. Also, all of our attendees are coming in on listen-only mode. So again, the best way to reach us is through the Q&A feature. We will be recording the webinar. It will be posted on our IIRP.edu website under the webinar link, and you'll be getting a follow-up email with additional information as well. So we'll just start with introductions. For those of you that are not familiar with the IIRP, it's very traditional in our professional development events and all of our meetings to start with an open and go around. So we'll just start, introduce ourselves, where we are in the world, and if we're pursuing graduate studies, where we are in the process. So St. Clair, I'll start with you. We'll go to Arti, Alexandra, and then I'll finish that up.
Hi there, my name is St. Clair Adriaan, and I am a school principal at Academia Avance in Los Angeles, California. It is now 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Yes, I am a graduate student, and I just finished course number 5, which means I'm halfway done.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Arti. I'm based in New Delhi, India. So I work with this organization which is implementing a pilot restorative justice project in India, and I'm involved in that. I started out as being a lawyer, and now I've shifted focus to that. As for my studies, I've done my 9th course, so I have 1 course left. So almost through right at the end of it.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexandra. I am the marketing associate at the IIRP. I'm here to help facilitate with some of the questions. I'll be popping in every 15 minutes, helping out with that. And I actually just completed my first graduate course, RP 500, about 2 weeks ago. So that was my first one.
Thank you. And again, for those who are just joining, my name is Jamie Kaintz. I'm the Director of Student Services. I am in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I, too, just completed my 5th graduate course. St. Clair and I finished the same course at the same time, so we're very excited. I want to speak for you, but you look pretty happy. But it was a great experience, and I really enjoy working with our students, but having the opportunity to share the learning with our graduate students as a student myself has been really, really rewarding. So again, thank you all for joining. Arti, I know it's 4 a.m. your time, somewhere around that time, so thank you so much for making special accommodations, and St. Clair, thank you for taking time out of your day. We're going to jump in. Folks are on the call to learn more about what you're doing, what you do with your work, how is the education helping you, how are you moving your practice forward. So to get a better insight of that, can you briefly share about a specific assignment or a project that you completed in any of your courses and how it was useful in your work?
Me first? All right, so initially I went to the training, and that's how I got introduced to IIRP, and then I joined and signed up for the master's course. So the IIRP 500, which is part of just restorative justice, and the training, we were taught about the circles, how to conduct restorative practice, how to treat students with dignity, discipline with dignity. And the biggest thing where this came in extremely, extremely handy, whole school-wide, was when ICE arrested one of my students' dads right in front of the school one morning. I serve a large immigrant population, and it was traumatic, very traumatic for my student, but traumatic for the whole school. And we immediately on that day after the arrest, before we set advocacy and everything else in motion, started with circles to get kids to speak out, to get kids to tell us what they're feeling, to get the girl Fatima to share how things were going for her on that specific day. And throughout the period of his incarceration, until we were able to get him released from ICE, restorative practices, those circles, was extremely, extremely helpful in improving just the mindset and keeping students, allowing students to talk and share their feelings. And it was really helpful in just maintaining some sort of, good feelings within the school.
So for me, like I said, we are at the stage of designing a pilot project. So it's all new. So a lot of my learning, I think, especially from the course on restorative justice in communities, on best practice on restorative justice and the evidence of what works, is something I've been using as we're designing the project. And that's very helpful. I think at a more significant level, my learning shifted the focus from just repairing harm to proactively building relationships. That's definitely not something I'd thought about before. And now, like, we started working with youth, just doing proactive circles where we, youth in custody, where we focus on how they can express themselves and social emotional learning before we go on to doing repairing the harm bit. So that's been like a huge learning from IIRP course.
Thank you. And I'll just share briefly from my own experience in this last course that I am just finishing today. The evaluation of research course tends to be one that students either embrace or they fear. There seems to be no happy medium. I was a little bit on the fence, but what I learned through the course was not only to better read research and be more critical and look for the gaps. What I found in a mind shift for myself, and I saw in a few of the students' posts, was research itself isn't as scary as we once thought it was. While we didn't actually dive into conducting research, through reading the research articles and the journal articles and recognizing that nothing's perfect, I found myself thinking about, what could I do research on? Because it's not a perfect science. So it made growing the field and supporting the growth of the field in restorative practices to seem like something that was a little bit more within my reach than I realized before I started the course. So that was a really big mind shift. I knew I would know how to read research better, but I had no idea that I wouldn't fear the thought of doing research. So that was a really big eye-opener from my own experiences. So and you both kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you can think back to one of your first courses or your very first course that you took, can you share a little bit about that experience? We all have an aha moment at a different time. And again, I know you touched on it, but maybe you could dig a little bit deeper into what that experience was like for you. And Arti, we'll start with you this time.
So my first course was RP 506, Restorative Justice, the Promises and Challenges. And the best thing was I could do it sitting in India without having done a professional learning so far. And you helped me, Jamie, to do that. So I thought, I'm a lawyer and I've come from the legal background, and my focus was on how to find ways to facilitate repairing harm better. And during that entire course, the focus was on how 80% of our work should only be on building relationships and doing proactive restorative work. And then we go on to do the rest of the 20%, which is repairing harm. And that was an absolutely new concept, because so far I'd thought of restorative, I'd only known of restorative justice and not so much of restorative practices. And I'd solely thought of it as coming in when there's been harm. So this was a whole new idea, and the more I thought about it, the more sense it began to make to me. And since then it's really made that change in my work and the way I see things. It's not just on doing restorative justice, but on relationships at work, and being restorative with myself too. So it's given that whole new dimension starting from that initial course.
Yeah, so my first course was Arti 541, and that was based on the World Conference. And so I attended the conference in Bethlehem, and the amazing part of it is that, you know, I came in from the education field, and everything I do and whatever is around education, and there was just the meeting of the minds of people working in the juvenile system, people in other organizations, and everyone was basically there for the same reason. And then just to see how restorative practices were implemented, restorative justice were implemented in a wider context outside of what I was comfortable and used to was amazing. So that was at the conference, and then following the conference, doing the courses, even some of the sessions that I attended, we dug into it deeper, discussions and everything else. But the main takeaway and the amazing part of that was just learning more about the restorative practice, restorative justice outside of the education field in which I was comfortable with.
Thank you. I want to go back. I made notes about something each of you had said, so I'd like to explore a little bit more. Arti, you said about being restorative with yourself. What does that mean?
So this started from 5 or 6. I just briefly looked at the idea, and then when I'd come for the conference, there was this amazing presentation by people from Australia who work in restorative works who spoke on this. And then I got this opportunity in the action research course, and that was a watershed moment for me. So I started from criminal justice, and then restorative relationships with one another. And finally, it came down to being restorative with myself, and I did my action research project on that. So using all the restorative tools which we use, like fair process, compass of shame, etc., all of that, I designed this questionnaire for myself. And every day I'd journal at the end of the day to see how restorative I was in my relationships and also with myself. So I used that project as a tool for being more self-compassionate. And over the 2-3 months the course lasted, that really helped me. And we had a professional learning group where everyone would pitch in and give suggestions, and I saw myself change over those 3 months. So that was definitely a turning point for me, that course. And since then, like, I was more type A before and, you know, harder on myself. I've just learned to let that go and treat myself with the same respect as I would others. So that's been beautiful.
It's a great learning experience. Thank you for sharing that. And St. Clair, the one thing that you mentioned that I'd like to go back to is the variety of professionals that you were working with. Sometimes, you know, a good portion of the individuals that are either attending our call tonight, attending our professional development events, attending our conferences or symposium, reaching out to us, are in a K-12 education. That's a good part of our population, but there's a good part, Arti, you and I are 2 of them, that are not in that field. So how does that help to advance your learning? When you're reading the books and you're attending the events, and there's a lot of educators, how did you find that experience learning from one another when the fields were so different?
It's just, as I said, just an amazing experience. And if I'm thinking about the conference we had in Detroit, where, I mean, the police department was doing restorative practice and restorative justice. They had trained parents in the community that supported juveniles getting in trouble with the law, and before they would arrest or take them in, these parents or community groups would do restorative practices. And if I look at the juvenile system, if I look at the police and everyone else, and I'm thinking of what I'm doing in a K-12 school, my main thing is to prevent it from getting to that point. So how to get the restorative justice in the school to stop or to just eradicate or redirect that school to prison pipeline. But having that open conversation and exposure to all the people in the other fields helped me a great deal in becoming more and more determined to make sure that the kids that pass through our school does not end up in that setting.
Great, thank you. And remember, folks, just a reminder, if you do have any questions for either Arti or St. Clair or myself, please use the Q&A feature. We're happy to take the time and stop to answer any questions. I would like to take a moment just to welcome any late arrivals. I know sometimes logging onto the Zoom and having to download starts the webinar for some folks a little bit later. So just a reminder that I am Jamie Kaintz, the Director of Student Services at the IIRP. Alexandra Shirey is not visible at the moment, but she's helping to facilitate with the questions and answers. She is our Marketing Associate. Arti Mohan is from New Delhi, India, and St. Clair Adriaan is joining us from Los Angeles. So as a principal, so we have a wide variety of attendees here. Thank you again for joining. And you know, for anyone who is interested in learning more about how to bring restorative practices into your work, what it can mean for you, how it can help you move your work forward, in addition to these webinars, there are multiple ways to get connected. We offer professional development events in a variety of locations. We've been talking a little bit about the Basic Restorative Practices event, which is the 4-day event. We offer that in multiple locations across the United States and a few locations outside of the US. So that's a great opportunity to really dip your toe in the sand, start learning some skills that you can take back right away and implementing within your own communities. We also offer graduate courses, and Arti talked about the 506 Restorative Practices, the Promise and the Challenge. That is a course that does not have a course prerequisite, so anyone can start that as early as the summer. Registration deadlines are as early as April, so it's something we would want to talk about relatively soon. Or the RP 500, which is the Basic Restorative Practices that St. Clair spoke of. In addition to these opportunities, we are working on the next conference, which will be held in Belgium in May, and the one following that will be back in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania in October. These are 2.5-day experiences, and we put a call for presenters out, so our conferences are unique to our professional development events because it's not only IIRP trainers or staff presenting the material. It's individuals. Arti, you mentioned, I think Arti mentioned about attending a session from presenters from Australia. So we do have people coming from all over the world to present at our conferences. And there's multiple sessions. You can really customize the conference experience that's most meaningful for you. Additionally, we have a symposium this summer. We only offer a symposium every other year, and this year the symposium is focused specifically on community and community health, and that will be in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania in July. All of these opportunities you can read more, and if you choose to register online through our website at iirp.edu. My colleagues and I are here to help you. I will be sharing all of our contact information on a slide, and we'll keep it up for you so you can take note or take screenshots of it. Feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. So I'd like to turn back to our guests. It looks like we don't have any questions as of yet. So St. Clair, let's start with you on this one. Our professors use restorative practices as an engagement tool in our courses and in the discussion forums. The forums are one of the primary mechanisms for communication in the courses between students. And one of the questions that we get a lot is, how much do you really get out of a discussion forum? You know, online learning and online experiences can be very different. They can be very cold, and our faculty does a lot of work to make our courses very interactive. So can you talk about how that experience using the discussion forums has been helpful for you and has helped you to move the work forward?
Yeah, so after I post, I seriously can't wait for someone to respond. The responses and the feedback that one gets on your post is so helpful. And sometimes it's just like you read the same chapter, you watch the same videos, but you missed something, and someone points you to that, and like, oh yes, and like the last course that you and I did together that had the final paper come after 2 different weeks of scaffolding, and with that feedback, with that discussion, it just empowered you to improve that final paper so much. So basically, getting to, I shared a class with Arti, I don't know if it was 5 or 6 or etc., but everyone, it's kind of like a family. You actually feel like you're sitting in a class. And when the name comes up and you see the feedback and you start reading, it is exciting, very helpful. Makes you go back and research a little more and question each other. And at the beginning, it was kind of like, I don't know people that well to whatever. Then you get comfortable and like, maybe you should have said this, that you missed this. Extremely helpful. And the end product, ultimately, when you write that final or midterm papers based on that discussion forums, extremely, extremely helpful. And it's a class community that becomes kind of family.
Thank you. Arti, can you speak to your experiences?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I think I felt this incredible sense of connection in all the courses, which I had never anticipated. I'm so far away physically from everyone, but we've just connected, and there's been such amazing feedback, which has helped me grow. And even the 2 courses where we had counseling practice, so this is restorative responses to adversity and trauma, and the one with youth, I forget the exact course number, but that was about, life space crisis counseling. So in both these courses, we had counseling practice where we would do it over Zoom. And that was incredible, like being so far away, there was so much value in those sessions. I practiced my skills, others practiced it with me. And it just helped us grow because we gave feedback in a very genuine way. And because they were coming from different backgrounds, not necessarily from the criminal justice system, from schools, etc., the viewpoints are sometimes a little different, and help me realize that children are children no matter what, whichever place we come from, whether it's schools or criminal justice system, and we can use the same tools they use. So that was incredibly enriching, and all of this happened through distance, right? Through Zoom and through forums, and it's been incredibly helpful.
Great, thank you. And I'll just speak a little bit about my experience in the Restorative Practices in Action course. This is a project-based course where we're creating and implementing a project. And my project was around work. That's the book we use. My project itself was around work within the office and building skills with my colleagues. And one of the greatest things that I experienced in the PLGs that we referenced before was that I could get immediate feedback about what I tried today and new ideas of how to address challenges or try new approaches tomorrow. So it was immediately applicable to the work that I do. And again, I'm in the minority of our population where I'm not in a K through 12 school, yet I shared my course with many educators. Arti, like you said, children are children, people are people. And the skills that we're learning are applicable regardless of what work environment we're actually working in. So that's been really helpful. I see a few questions pop up, so Alexandra, whenever you'd like to pop in, we can go ahead and start answering those.
Okay, so the first one would be specifically for St. Clair. we had a listener ask how you mentioned that the local police were implementing restorative practices. They wanted to know if you have any experiences where like the professionals at your school were the ones bringing restorative practices into the community.
So being the school leader, it was kind of easy to bring restorative justice, restorative practice into the school, and getting teachers and other school employees to buy into what we're doing. How did it get to the community? The bus drivers, for example, started doing restorative practices on the bus with kids that were not getting along or arguing, etc. I've had parents come to school and say, "Mister, what are you doing with these kids? This kid had a problem with her dad, and she sat the whole family down, and we had a circle. She told me it was something that you've been teaching her." So within the school, into the families, I also discuss it with our parent forum. So that's how it gets into the community. The situation with the police was a very Detroit-based restorative justice, because the whole community is involved over there. But wherever we can, within the LA area, wherever we have community forums, we share the restorative justice aspect, and people are very eager to learn.
Thank you. And then another question for you. So we have a listener asking if you use circles in your classroom, and if you could share some steps that you would recommend to encourage other teachers in the school to start using circles.
Yeah, so circles is part of our advisory or house curriculum. And we, first of all, prep the kids with setting the norms for what circles are, making sure that they know it's a safe place, and that everyone's equal, that whatever is being said within the circle remains within the circle, so that everyone is free to speak their mind in terms of finding a solution. We do circles school-wide, and within the 5 days in a week, at least 1 to 2 circles in advisory. And sometimes it's a planned circle, sometimes it's based on something that has happened. Sometimes it's when another teacher tells a house teacher, this is what's happening in your class or with your house. And so circles are part of our everyday life. And sometimes if something happens, teachers, and they have the freedom, because I've given permission to stop teaching and have a circle, find a solution, and then continue with their work.
And just a reminder, just interrupt for a second. If you have a question, please do use the Q&A as opposed to the chat. It's easier for us to keep track of the questions and make sure that if we don't get to all of them, we can respond back later this week.
Okay, and should we do one more question? This question says, how do we convince parents, teachers who believe more in punishment instead?
Arti?
I'm going to say educate yourself. Learn more, because the more information that you have, the more real it becomes. The more genuine it becomes, and the more you implement and the more you change your behavior and you change your approaches to helping other people change their behavior, the more visual it becomes to the larger population.
Right. Many people, when I started at the school, many people, staff members, saw it as soft justice, soft discipline. Nothing's going to change. And, I tried, but what I learned was through modeling and them seeing the change. I had 11th graders that has had issues, 5 girls, since middle school. And that issues carried all the way to high school, 11th grade. And this year I had a circle, and I brought all 11th grade teachers in to observe the circle that I had with these girls. And after all the tears and the misunderstandings and the huggings and the everything in the circle, when the kids left and I had a quick post-mortem with the teachers, they were like, oh, wow, now I see how this works. And those girls are still good friends, but what they saw in that meeting was everything was about misunderstanding, but the approach and how it came about was what solved that problem. I don't know, Arti, if you want to share something.
And that's what we are using so far, but we really haven't gotten there. So a little premature for us to talk about, especially because we are working with the criminal justice system. But exactly what you said, we are trying to use modeling to show that it does work and be more effective.
Okay, so I have a question from someone asking what would be best for, depending on their situation, the graduate certificate or getting professional development training. Is there something that got you to go forward past professional development and start getting into graduate courses, and what got you to continue with graduate courses?
All right, let me start with my story. I went into the training. I think I was a little restorative previously, didn't know there was a thing called restorative justice, and had the 2-day training first. Like, whoa, I like this. Then I decided to go to Bethlehem to a conference. And I was just sitting there, and they had the graduate school, and Jamie was sitting across, and I went up and started asking questions, and I signed up for no intention for the degree program. Not that I needed to. This is my 6th degree, and I wasn't planning on doing any after number 5, but I was caught up in wanting to dig in, wanting to learn more. And I can tell you that in the 5 courses that I've done, from action research to the evaluation course, that I have learned so much. But besides the professional part that Arti also spoke to earlier, personally, this has changed me. I mean, I know at one point I told myself, hey, Adriaan, you can't just be restorative at school. You have not spoken to a close friend of yours for over 7 years because of something that happened at a school. You are professing to be in this restorative justice world and da-da-da-da, and yet you haven't spoken to your buddy for 7 years. And based on what I'm learning, and based on this course, and based on what restorative justice and practices means, I reached out. So bottom line, it changes your life in everything you do. I don't get as excited. People look at me like, you're just not going to get excited if a kid does something. I just get up and go and talk nicely, and we figure it out. When previously, it's amazing, the change, the transformation, the metamorphosis. But what's even more amazing is how it changes just the environment around you into a happy environment where people respect each other.
So for me, when I started with the professional learning events, they were great. But I started out my education with IIRP looking for more skill training. So I'd been trained in restorative justice earlier. But I thought that if I make this a career and this is what work I do, I need more training, because I definitely didn't want to cause harm, especially because my work started out with children who'd been sexually abused, so a very vulnerable population. So I wanted to equip myself with the skills. And as I did one training and more, I realized the whole of my experience with IIRP has been like an extended skill training. In different forms, I've had different experiences, whether it's been counseling or using different techniques with youth. And that's what's kept me going more from course to course. And every course has added something like that. And that's why I've reached the 9th degree, and now I have the final thing left.
Okay, so here's another question. They're asking, are there any available tools that can model community circles and or other questioning strategies, so that can kind of equate to, do you feel the graduate courses are giving you the tools and the skills you need to implement the restorative practices and like within your work?
So we've been doing circles with youth in custody every week, and every week we design a new theme. So of course the education doesn't give us directly, okay, go do this. We adapt it, but the tools to design what would work, to understand youth brain science and how they work, and all of that, and what a circle would look like. How do we start the circle? What do we do at the core, and how do we end? That's all come from the learnings.
Right, and for me, I have had a dean who was hardcore by the book. And at the beginning of the year, I said to him, please send me the discipline policy. I read the first 2 lines and sent it back to him and said, you better start all over. There is no such thing as, it will be dealt with in that. I said, you start over. The first 2 lines turned me off. I need you to be just more restorative. I sent him to restorative training. Now he's actually in competition with me in being more restorative. But the way he's dealing with things, and I did not think I was going to be able to convert him, but the training has empowered him to serve our students in a so much better way. But also, just besides the way he now interacts with kids, the way he interacts with parents when he calls them about the situation. After that training, he was empowered. He came back well, first of all, I knew when he went for the training, he's not the role play kind of guy, and I didn't say anything about that. And he came back, he's like, man, you knew about this or whatever. But then he said the best part of this was the third and fourth day, the conferencing part. He says, now I know how to set it up when I've got to have those conversations. So before I call those parents in, I now know how to approach it. And just seeing that transformation just reinforced to me like how important, how useful the training is.
Thank you. Any additional right now, Alexandra, or should we move on?
I think for now.
Okay, great. Remember, folks, if you have questions, just type them into the Q&A. Alexandra will pop in again before we end the call. So, Arti, we're going to start with you on this one. How have the courses, because we're getting some questions about the courses and the application, so how have the courses helped you to address some of the trauma that's been experienced by the people that you work with?
So, though I started out my litigation work with children who've been sexually abused, our restorative justice work is starting out with less serious offenses because we want to tread lightly and start with that before we go into sexual harm. However, that doesn't mean that trauma doesn't exist. Trauma exists everywhere. With youth who come into the system, there's often that. So as of now, it's not the restorative justice programs we designed, but a lot of techniques, like the course we did on restorative responses to adversity and trauma, had a lot of tools and techniques like compassionate witnessing was one tool which we'd use to help people just be there with them in the moment when they're talking about their trauma. And that's something that I'm able to use on such a regular basis, wherever when I'm listening to anyone, whether it's a youth or an adult, anyone who's speaking about their harm, because it's a very validating tool. And for someone from a legal background to come to that, for a counselor, I'm sure it's much easier, for a psychologist or someone who anyway works with children. But they made it so simple, like the course made it so simple, and it was easy to replicate. And the mock sessions really helped me do that. So that's how I'm using it now. And when it comes to program design for a restorative justice model, of course, the learnings from my independent study, which I did, that was solely on designing a trauma-informed restorative justice model. So that looked at different types of restorative practices for people who've been severely traumatized, some involving the person who's caused harm, some not, depending on where the person's at. So all of that learning is going into the program design as I work on that. who'd speak first when we get the person who's caused harm and who's been harmed together, who'd speak first. So that learning comes from there, and it's evolving as we work program time.
Wonderful, thank you. St. Clair?
Yes. So I think the important part of schools, and it's particularly the age of kids that I'm currently working with in the high school, and what's going on in the country. I have quite a big amount of undocumented students, and based on what's going on, the trauma that they're experiencing, I had to change my leadership, because when a student now comes halfway through a class and say, "Mr. Can I just call home?" Because we take their cell phones in the mornings together at the end of the day. "Can I just call home to see if my mom made it home from work?" And the reason for that is because they know someone else's mom or dad did not make it home from work because they were arrested along the way. So what has been really helpful with the traumatic experiences the kids are going through, what I've learned through all the courses, is that skills of active listening, the skill of allowing the students just to speak. And then we have the groups. We have a group, the Churla group, of all undocumented students that comes together on a Friday, and just basically speak about the feelings, what's going on at home, etc. So many of all of the courses that I've done so far has really prepared me to, first of all, empower the teachers within the school, but also empower myself into being able to listen, knowing what fair process is, knowing what the compass of shame is, knowing all those type of things, but ultimately allowing kids to speak, listen, and let them leave, find the solutions. On the other spectrum, where it comes to kids doing or causing harm, is taking ownership, having that conversation with the person who was harmed, and both parties coming together at the end in finding that solution, and seeing students ultimately agree, seeing families agree, breaking bread at the end. But what I've been taught through this, that it is very, very, very helpful if students trust, if they have voice, if they are listened to, if they are not belittled, and if they know that they are being a part of the solution without being treated in an undignified way.
Thank you. You've both shared very moving experiences. I commend you both. Everyone's doing great work, but you're really working with some challenging situations and scenarios, and your students, your colleagues are very fortunate to have you there in the roles that you're in. So thank you for that. Throughout your experiences, there's always that one instructor, that one professor that stood out. That was not that any of them are better than the other, but maybe you had a different relationship, or they were able to help move you along in a different way. Is there anyone that really stood out for either of you?
Well, I can start. So for my the one that stands out and that actually has made a difference since the day I met her was Beth Small. First of all, she was part of the initial training in the IIRP course, and then I met her up in Bethlehem, and then she was a lecturer for one of my courses. And she's inspiring, easy to talk to, always available when you reach out. And what was the best part for me in having worked with Beth, or having had Beth as a lecturer, is that she keeps it real, she keeps it 100, and you know exactly what's up and what's going well and where to improve. And so I really appreciated Beth and the classes that I've had with her.
So hard for me to pick one person. I think every faculty I work with has been a very enriching experience. I worked the most extensively with Dr. Frida because I've done an independent study and 2 other courses. So I've done 3 courses in all with her. And for the independent study, she gave me space to design the entire course and the readings. And there was a huge time investment, and she'd read every week. I'd write like a paper of 10 pages and she'd read that and give me feedback. Plus she'd help me with skills and everything. So that was a huge commitment, and that meant a lot to me because it helped me grow. Though I was directing things myself, I really needed that mentorship with that, and that was absolutely fabulous. And something that's really helped me grow has been the counseling practices, the compassionate witnessing practices, where we did that over Zoom sessions, and her presence has just helped me be more confident with that. So all over, it's been an amazing experience working with her.
Thank you. Alexandra, you have a couple more questions that came through?
Yes. So one question I have is, what are ways you've used restorative practices to improve one-on-one relationships personally?
Okay, I can start with that. Just basically, within the school setting, just dealing and speaking with staff. My whole persona has changed in terms of the approach, in terms of the tone and everything else. And what also has changed is the outcome. Because now teachers aren't feeling that there's this authoritarian or top-down guy that's speaking to me, but the way I interact with staff has changed since I've become or been working in this restorative paradigm. But also with just with friendships and relationships outside of school, with buddies and even family. It's more let's talk about it right now than walking away. And how can we solve this? Or even, I mean, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes my sister would tell me, oh, your brother, la, la, la. And I said, okay. And then I'll get the 2 of them together. And I'm like, okay, we're going to solve the situation right now. This is whatever. So now I'm having family restorative justice. Or they know that they like telling me like, oh, so Mr. Restorative, like, what do you think about what you said? Oh, yeah, no, sorry, that wasn't too restorative. But now I get called out on it. And I'm able to facilitate it with relationships inside and outside of the profession that I'm in.
For me, I think it's guided me towards being more direct and honest and expressing my needs genuinely. And with others, separating the person from their behavior. Often people do things which are hurtful to me or otherwise. My whole learning here has helped me see that they're different and they're reacting in this way because there's hurt or there's pain or there's shame underlying that. And making that distinction has really helped me have more grace towards people and help them process that underlying need rather than just saying, oh, that's a bad person, did that to me. So that's the way it's helped me.
Okay, and I think the final question will be, for Sinclair in a school setting, if you have school staff that are resistant to restorative practices, do you have any suggestions on particular activities or something to share that might help them along the transition into using restorative practices?
Yes, so I had well, there's a few staff right at the beginning that weren't really warming up towards the restorative practice, but I had the one guy. So we have a middle school and a high school. So I was in the middle school principal. So he'd leave the middle school and go to the high school. But what he didn't know is I heard what he said when he got to the high school. Like, you send kids to Sinclair to the office, he sits and talks to them, gives them a lollipop, and they come straight back. And so I just made it my duty to, when something's going on, because he used to send 6 kids at a time to the office for real silly things. So when that happens, I just walk the kids back stand right next to him. Don't say anything. Like, why do you think you were sent to the office? Da, 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 da. What were you doing wrong? And then they respond. No one gets upset. No one's crying. No one's yelling. No one's whatever. About 3-4 months in, he came to me, and he said, wow, now I catch on to what it is that you're saying. You know, if I speak to the kids in this way, like I saw you do it, and then I get this result. And I said, yeah. And I thought I just gave them a lollipop. He's like, oh, you know about that? And I said to him, yeah, but no, that's okay. But so through modeling, it's some people, old school people, are still hard because many of the staff were used to just pushing the kids out. What I did at the beginning of the year, besides the restorative justice practice, I also did a session on owning your conflict. And so I expect teachers to own their conflict. I introduced myself to them at the beginning of the year during staff meeting. Hey, my name is St. Clair Adriaan, and I used to be a conflict thief. I used to steal conflicts that teachers had with kids. I don't do that no more. I'm recovered conflict thief. You deal with your conflict. So through all that, empower the teachers how to deal with it. There's still one or two that they just don't want the kid back in the class, so they'll get upset on that one day or etc. But mostly the whole school has started to embrace restorative practices.
Anything else pop through, Alexandra?
There is this one. There are several classes that are required, but a listener would like to know if you guys have a favorite elective or if you would like to suggest an elective to take.
I think restorative responses to adversity and trauma. From my context, that makes so much sense. And it wasn't, it was exactly the appropriate amount, what you'd need. And I think that's something for anyone in any field, irrespective of whether we work with very traumatized populations or not, because that much trauma is there everywhere. That's absolutely one of my favorite courses to do. Also action research. Sorry, I can't pick one.
Yeah, that was my one.
Yeah. So that, because it just gave me this way of working on myself in a very real and tangible way, and learning action research methodology, which I never knew of, and I think it's fantastic.
So my one is action research as well, just because I had a chance to look at the organization and figure out what's not right, and then observations through the surveys and everything else, figure out what the temperature, what the feelings of the whole stuff was. But the best part was, what was my role into the problem that we were having or experiencing within the organization, which is not an easy task or easy to accept at all times. But then realizing that the reason why communication was an issue within it because this one did this one did that, but that action research was a great insight into the organization that you find yourself in. I really enjoyed that one.
Thank you both. And I just want to make note, the restorative responses to adversity and trauma that Arti mentioned has been retitled to Transforming Relational Harm. So if you are on the website looking at the courses, this is now a fully online course. It is offered in the summer, but it does have a prerequisite, the IIRP 500. So again, I'm going to pop up our contact information shortly. Take the screenshot, get in touch with myself or one of my colleagues, and we can certainly talk you through that process. So I know there's a few other questions that came through. We will get back to you this week. Alexandra will make sure that I have all the information, but being very conscientious of time, I'm going to share the contact information. And as I do that, I just want to remind folks that there's a couple different ways to get involved. Other than the webinars, remember the professional development events, the basic restorative practices is really considered a foundational event for us, and it's a really solid starting point if you are looking to further explore and build your skills. Belgium is coming up in May. We are still accepting registrations for that. The Summer Symposium in Bethlehem is in July. That's a 2.5-day experience. There is a course that can be taken as an elective immediately following the symposium. The Bethlehem World Conference is in October. Again, that is also a 2.5-day event. Both the Belgium and the Bethlehem course can be taken as an elective in October. And of course, the graduate courses are also available. So please take down our contact information. If you have any specific questions related to the work that Arti or St. Clair are doing, they have given me the permission to share their emails, so feel free to contact them. If you have questions about any of the professional development events or the conferences or the graduate courses, please contact me. If I can't help, I will get you directed to the correct person who can. So while we have the contact information slide up, give you a couple minutes, I would like to do a traditional checkout, and we'll start with Arti this time and go to St. Clair, Alexandra, and I'll wrap up. What is one thing, one takeaway that you hope our guests will leave today's webinar with?
I think listening to St. Clair about his experiences at school was so inspiring for me, and I hope that's something that stays with our guests too, because it's really made a difference. Like, your work has changed people's lives, and I think that's something that I hope everyone takes away, that the power of restorative practice is to really change lives.
Right, and to me, it's like just important that you realize that it doesn't just change you professionally, but personally, it also has a great impact on just your interaction at the store, in the street, everything, everywhere. Your paradigm, the mindset that you're in is restorative. And sometimes when you do something outside of that restorative, like I come, ooh, that wasn't too restorative, St. Clair. You better make that right till you get back to school tomorrow. So you start becoming really self-aware.
For me, I would have to say just the opportunity that the graduate courses could get you, especially when there's like a lot of passion. It's great to see the excitement, especially you guys had when talking about your electives and what your favorite professors and lecturers were. That was great to see that you're getting a lot more than just learning tools.
Thank you. And what I'd like to see everyone take away from today's webinar is flexibility. Listening to both St. Clair and Arti, how you get started, how you start your learning, there's a lot of different ways to do that. And there's a lot of different capping points. So the degree may not be appropriate for everyone. Maybe it's the certificate. And that's, it's really about what's best for you and what meets your needs. Even getting started, whether it's by attending a conference or a symposium, or breaking the basic restorative practices into 2 different sessions of 2-day events. There's a lot of different ways to customize your learning experience with the IIRP. So I'm hoping that everyone that leaves the call today leaves understanding a little bit about the flexibility that's available for you. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Arti, thank you so much for getting up so early to be with us today. St. Clair, thank you for taking time out of your day. Your stories were truly inspiring. I hate to rob a word that's been used, but both of you have inspiring stories. Both of you are doing great work, and thank you so much for sharing them with us. Have a great night, everybody, and we will get the recording up shortly. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.